One of the experiences I trust every homebrewer shares is the feeling of awe that comes from witnessing the conversion of wort into beer through the fermentation process. Even after 15 years, I still get giddy when I see the first signs of airlock activity, a nice fluffy kreuzen developing on top of my beer. The worst is when this takes too long. You all know the anxiety that comes from checking on a batch a day after pitching and seeing no action. This is why we love Imperial Yeast, who pack 200 billion cells of the purest yeast into each pitch-right pouch, which assures quick starts, healthy fermentation, and predictably great results. I strongly urge all of our listeners to check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and let them know that you appreciate their support of the Brülosophy Podcast while you're at it. All right, on to the show. As I imagine is the case for most people listening to this show, my first introduction to beer involved fizzy yellow lager, which in my case came from a red and white can. Now, I've little doubt that Budweiser, Miller, and Coors are some of the biggest gateway beers out there, the spark that set ablaze many a drinker's love of craft beer, which then resulted in their aberrance for the former. This is the Brülosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and you're listening to the second in our Brews View series, where we share our unabashed opinions on a topic of importance to brewers and beer drinkers. Joining me to discuss the various aspects of so-called big beer is not only contributor Matt Del Fiacco, but my brother-in-law, Uncle Joe Schmidt.
Hey, Marshall, really excited to talk about this one just because it is one of the more, I think, seriously taken topics in brewing especially, and it's one of those things where you have opinions that range just all over the place. Like there's some people who are like won't buy big beer, don't want to support any of the brands that they have invested in, and then you have people maybe a little more on our side who are just going to like drink whatever's handed to them or go out of their way. So it's really, and I think it's a really important thing to talk about just because there's so much not misinformation, but there's so much information thrown around out there that I think is speculative, so much information out there that is like rooted in some kind of trend. So I'm excited to talk about it. And I'm nervous as shit. I'm so nervous to talk about it. I am going to be so anxious this whole time.
Yeah. I have a feeling that we're going to ruffle some feathers, which of course isn't, I mean, I guess it sort of is our purpose, but we're all friends here. Uncle Joe, you have some experience, and I should say that you're sitting in the studio here, the Brülosophy Laboratory, if you will. You have some experience homebrewing, making cider, stuff like that. But you also, as I think most people do, have some opinions on the corporate influence in various realms of life, incling beer and whatnot.
Yeah. I live in Berkeley, so that
says everything.
Yeah, I'm done.
No. Yeah, we know your opinion.
No, I am a proponent. I think in not just in beer, but in so much of this kind of fan culture that we're in. People can be very picky about a variety of things. And for me, it's that if you enjoy something, you enjoy it. And if it's good, it's good for a reason.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a contentious topic indeed, one that I'm looking forward to getting into with both of you. Something I really value about being a human is the ability to disagree with people without being a dick, which is certainly our plan for this episode. And I really hope, again, that our listeners are grown up enough to understand that just because one of us might disagree with you or do something that you don't, I guess, appreciate, that doesn't mean we can't still be friends. Let's all be friends. We're friends, right, guys?
Yeah, we're friends. We're totally friends.
Okay, good. As much as you might
not
hate
economists.
Me. Yeah.
Not economists.
A couple disclaimers about this show up front. First off, we are in no way sponsored or supported by any corporate brewing entities such as AB InBev or Miller Coors. I promise. Should something like that ever occur, you will be able to find me on my yacht in the Caribbean. And second, please remember that this series is uncensored, meaning we're not going to be overly concerned about using language that some people might not really like too much. So fair warning, we're going to talk like big boys. And one last thing, we're going to be using the term big beer quite a bit in this show. And all we're referring to with that are these huge corporate breweries, pretty much anything bigger than Sierra Nevada or Sam Adams. So, we're talking Miller, Coors, BMC.
I would even say like a good way to talk about that, like just to clarify the big beer term, is really any kind of conglomerate that owns other brands, right? Like any beer, it's not just like, oh, we have a really big brewery like Sierra Nevada or Bell's, who are like majority owned by an individual.
Right.
We're talking about any brewery or any brand that is owned by a larger entity. So like Miller Coors, of course, is the classic. AB InBev is another one of the really, really big ones. But, Diageo, I'm not going to pronounce that correctly, but like, all those big ones.
Yeah. Constellation Brands, all those big ones. You're right.
Yep, Constellation Brands for sure.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun one. All right, if you enjoy this show and you'd like to make sure that it sticks around for a while, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Brülosophy, where in return for making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops, and an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with someone badass in the brewing world. Coming up later this month is Oregon State University hop researcher Dr. Tom Shellhammer, who is sure to share some fascinating information on our favorite flower. I don't know about you, Matt, but I'm really excited to that we were able to get Dr. Shellhammer on.
I'm a little astounded. I feel like we're not credible enough for this. Like, I don't know if he knows what he's like signing up for and getting into, but I'm super excited. I have a lot of hop creep questions.
Yeah, right. Hop
answered,
creep,
so.
Hop saturation, dry hop saturation, all that fun stuff. Past guests have included folks like Seth Klon from Mecca Great Estate Malt, Russian River's Vinny Chilurzo, and Grandmaster BJCP Judge Gordon Strong. And all past sessions are available on our private Facebook page for patrons to watch whenever they want to. Learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. And if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we would really appreciate it. All right, feedback this week is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who offer brewers gorgeous stainless gear such as the turnkey BH15 Pilot Brewing System, which is a hard plumb manifold to eliminate all hosing changes during the brew process. Brewers Hardware has a ton of unique purpose-built products useful to both professionals and homebrewers. Go see for yourself at brewershardware.com. And don't forget to mention Brülosophy at checkout to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. All right, listener Jacob Cowell wrote in with a question about getting involved with Brülosophy. He says, "Hey, Brew Crew, I love what you're doing and would love even more to be a part of it. I know you've got contributors all around the U.S. and was wondering how I might be able to get involved as a taster. Maybe I live near one of you guys, or maybe beers could be sent out. It just sounds like a fun thing to be a part of." Jacob, thank you so much for reaching out about this. I take full responsibility for not being more active in letting folks know how to get involved. We tried the whole, send beer to participants thing, and it just did not work out too well. Broken bottles, beers oxidized. It really was just hard to control how the data was being collected as well. That said, we would love to get whoever lives anywhere near any of us involved. All you have to do is shoot us an email, which for all of us is our first name at brülosophy.com. And here's a list of where we're at. Matt is in the Chicago area, and you travel a lot around to different clubs and whatnot for data collection, right?
Yeah, I do. I've got like a 2-hour radius around my home that I will end up going to for it. So I'm all over the place. If you're near Chicago, I will get to you.
Yeah. I know that there's like a barbecue thing that you go to with Pale, if I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, that was a blast. So that was actually Chaos, the Chaos barbecue. Right. Yeah. That was that was a couple weekends ago now. And that was an incredible event. We served an experiment there and a couple other ciders and stuff. It was a really, really great turnout. And everyone loves doing triangle tests. It's a blast. It's especially like at festivals and stuff, because it's just a little break in the monotony of wait in line, get this beer, wait in that line, get that beer.
It's more like wait in line, do some work.
Exactly. Yeah. Please
get proven
do
wrong
my work for me.
We've also got contributors in various other places across the U.S. Jake Houlihan lives in Denver, Colorado. Brian Hall lives way up in Anchorage, Alaska. Phil Rusher is in Auburn, New York. Cade Job is in Austin, Texas. Malcolm Fraser now lives in Cleveland, Ohio. He was the one who was in Atlanta for a bit. He's now in Cleveland. He works at Fatheads. And then Paul Amico and myself live right here in Fresno, California. Like I said, all you have to do, first name at brülosophy.com, wherever you can contact me, and I will forward your request to whoever you live closest to as well. Again, thanks for asking the question, Jacob. You didn't mention where you're at, but here's to hoping it is near one of us so that you can get involved. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or drop us a line on social media. One of my favorite things about living where I live here in California, and Uncle Joe, you can relate to this, is how close we are to some really great breweries, including Sierra Nevada, which in my opinion is one of the, they're a huge brewery. Talking about big beer who
Most
have
definitely.
not sold out.
Yeah.
They're a gigantic brewery, but they occasionally, they always have a 12 pack, like a mix pack, right? Well, right now in their mix pack, they include, among other really good beers, they include an orange flavored beer called Sidecar that admittedly I just wasn't a huge fan of. So I reserved those bottles and served them to my friends to see what they think.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
Clean, golden.
Terrible. I don't like it. I haven't even tasted it.
I don't like it either.
Well, I don't like it. I can tell from the looks. It's got a real nice color to it. I can see your face
nice
through it.
color.
Yep, there's your eyeball. Yep, I can see your face through it.
It's not me. It's very, it's piney.
Nothing. It's good.
There you go.
It's in like an IPA light. It's a light IPA.
Yeah. I give it has no aftertaste, so that's good for me, but I don't like it.
Well, because you don't like it because you don't like IPAs.
Exactly.
It might not be an IPA. It's a PA. It's a pale. It's like an IPA light, bro. It's got a little bit of that IPA
It's not bad.
taste.
I've had a lot worse. Kind of
tastes like an IPA mixed with like a Miller Coors, like a Coors. Mix a Coors and an IPA.
It's growing on me.
It's got that IPA flavor. It's not too strong. I like it a lot. You know nothing. You're ridiculous. You're
never
bringing
said
me
I-
down. You're like a boat
I never
anchor.
said I knew
You're like a
anything.
boat anchor on my learnedness. Yeah, I like that a lot.
If it is a PA, it's better than most, but it's just not my flavor.
It kind of falls away at the end, though. It's got me at the
Which
start.
is good for me.
It's got me at the start, then it falls away at the end. There's nothing there. It's like a love gone wrong.
Yeah.
It's like a love gone wrong, bro. Starts out great, and then
Little
just
caramel?
falls away at the
No?
end. Caramel?
Yeah.
I thought it was caramel? Yeah, maybe.
What'd you get?
Yeah, now that you say that. Well, this is a fallacy of modern learnedness. If you say something, I'm going to taste it. It tastes like crickets. You taste crickets.
Well, being I've never had a cricket,
I like it.
I don't think it's just a pale ale. It's IPA.
Whatever. It's a IPA light. It's a light IPA.
It is very light. A little bit of caramel.
It's a light IPA.
That's all I got.
I like it.
The more I drink it, the more I do.
The
like
more I
actually.
drink it, the more I drink it, the more I think. It could be a Saison.
You know what? It's not bad.
I finished it. I like it. It's an IPA light. I give it 8 jerseys.
I'm gonna go just middle of the row, 7.
Okay, that's only 55 jersey tins.
Well, no surprise Timmy wasn't a lover and Jersey liked it, though. It was kind of surprising to me that Tim kind of started to come around. I think we've gotten used to hearing Tim after he actually gets used to the beer he's drinking, starting to kind of not love it, but enjoy it more than when he started.
Yeah, he's definitely it sounds like he finished that beer for sure. Like it doesn't sound like he set it back down and didn't take it in anymore,
Right.
Which you would expect. I would expect at least from any Sierra Nevada beer. Like I would never expect someone to taste a Sierra Nevada beer and be like, nope, I'm not going to finish this. Like at the very least, they're good beers.
Yeah. And have you had Sidecar yet? The orange flavored one?
I haven't had a chance to have Sidecar.
No.
I haven't had it either.
So Joe hasn't had it either. I actually have a couple bottles left on my fridge that you can
Well, there
drink
we
later.
go, yeah.
But to me, the orange flavor is not overpowering, but there's something about intentionally fruited, particularly with citrus beers. I'd rather get my citrus from the hop character, Sure. I'm not a lover of it, hence the fact that there are still a couple of bottles in my fridge, but we will be finishing those up today. So if you'd like to have your beer or any other fermented beverage reviewed by Jersey and Tim, you can email me, Marshall@Brülosophy.com, and we will get you all set up. When we're back from this break, we'll be sharing various opinions we have regarding big beer. So I've been hanging out with brewers and craft beer nerds for a long time now, and while we do occasionally have our differences, one thing it seems we all share is a love of learning and trying new things, as well as saving a couple of bucks. Well, right now, Craft Beer and Brewing is helping fans of Brülosophy learn more while saving some coin by offering 20% off the price of a subscription to their awesome magazine. Chock full of brewing insights, tips, and recipes from industry experts, Craft Beer and Brewing is seriously great. I read every issue page to page myself. To get 20% off your subscription, all you have to do is sign up at beerandbrewing.com/Brülosophy. Want to brew quality craft beer at home? The Grainfather provides a brewing system with superior design, innovative features, and the latest technology, allowing you to brew professional quality craft beer at home. Mash, sparge, boil, and cool all in one unit, meaning there's less equipment to use, clean, and store. No need for burners or hot plates. Just plug it in and brew great beer. Then get the best out of your fermentation with the Grainfather conical fermenters and glycol chiller. Plus, enhance your brewing experience with the brand new free-to-use Grainfather community app. You can take your brewing tools and your recipes with you everywhere, use brewing calculators on the fly, manage your recipes, and monitor your brew session from anywhere. Use your mobile device to manage your Grainfather brew wirelessly, automate mash schedules, and multitask without removing any of the brewing hands-on fun. Grainfather products can all be found at www.grainfather.com. Plus, as a Brülosophy podcast listener, get 10% off your order. Just use discount code Brülosophy19 at checkout. That's BRULosophy19 to receive 10% off your order. So head to shop.grainfather.com now to get this great deal. Chilling wort can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Exchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brülosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Exchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Exchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to exchillerator.com today. I was one of those kids whose parents let me steal sips of beer, which at the time was usually the king of beers, Budweiser. When I hit my teens, my friends and I developed a liking for the more potent, quote, ice beers, which I later learned were actually malt liquor. It wasn't until I was in college in Bellingham, Washington, that I learned there were different options and started brewing for myself, at which point I became a huge fan of craft and, of course, a huge hater of the evil corporate breweries out there. Perhaps I'm wrong, but it seems to me this is a pretty common experience among beer drinkers and home brewers.
I have a good story about ice beer.
Oh boy.
So I played rugby in college, and we would have our rugby parties every Saturday after the game, and we would get 3 kegs, and 2 of them would be Natty Light, and 1 of them would be Natty Ice. Now we would start with the Natty Light, and then we would take the labels off, so we wouldn't know what was coming in next.
Oh my God.
So either in the middle of the party, everybody would lose their shit, or late at night when everybody was already losing their shit, it would get even darker.
My God. Well, you know what I'm saying, Matt. Joe, you've got some experience with homebrewing and whatnot, but in this, Matt, I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are. But in this culture, in this group, it is very, very popular to hate on big beer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's like a talking point. Especially, it's you see those memes all the time of like, oh, Budweiser is piss that they've repackaged or something like that. Like there's always like those just jokes about like, yeah, this is a terrible product,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to me is like the criticism is frequently like, this is a terrible product and not these business practices are potentially dangerous.
Exactly.
Which is more so my fear as opposed to like, I think PBR and Budweiser and Miller taste fine. And I grew up, I never really was like a Miller Lite drinker even. I think a lot of people did start out that way. I started out with like mostly Guinness and stuff. Like I started drinking when I went to England. So
fancy.
I know. So I had like that stuff around frequently. And so I don't really get the flavor hate. I don't really get the criticism of the beers themselves. But and I do fearfully think that part of the criticism of big beer comes from the secret dream that every home brewer holds, which is to open an independent brewery.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. I think that's part of it, right? Like it's like every home brewer is like, I could do this. And as a part of that, the thing is, but I am going to not be able to compete with Ab and Bev.
I think you are giving a lot of credit to to these people who are dreaming. I'll put it that way. This morning, before everyone was awake in my house, my wife was over here on the computer doing some weekend, couponing or whatever. And I asked her, I told her what we're doing for the show today. And I said, what are your thoughts? As somebody who's not really plugged into this industry necessarily. And her comment, and I think it's got a lot of merit. Her comment was an interesting one. She said, there are you've got these homebrewers who have this, who develop this idea, this hate, right? This lack of an appreciation for a company, but what is it based on? It feels like it's baseless. And they go and they start talking this talk, and with, like you said, Matt, kind of with this dream. But I'm not sure the hate is necessarily because of they fear competing against big beer. I'm sort of with my wife who said the hate is kind of just a part of being or their attempt. And I get nervous talking about this, but yeah, it's clicky. It's like the cool thing to hate on big beer. It's in the same way. It's like a cool thing to hate on Walmart or a cool thing to hate on Amazon nowadays. Yeah. And there are two things. There's Amazon, there's Walmart, and then there are certain business practices that maybe we do genuinely disagree with, but to generalize and to kind of I don't know. That's sort of I'm with my wife in that it becomes this almost baseless, annoying thing to watch people hate for the sake of hating.
Yeah, there's a sense of groupthink
totally
that comes into this where people say, "Oh well, this person doesn't like this because of this, and then there are 5 people in a room who don't like it, and then there's 10, and then there's all over the internet, everything spreads. I think for me, you have to look at, if you can, separate these big beer companies and look at first that they are able to create a product that is as successful as it is, and that is consistently as consistent as it is.
Yeah.
Which is a really, especially as a home brewer, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
To continue to figure out and make a product that is consistently at the same level of quality. Now, you can argue about what that quality is.
Sure.
But that's impressive in itself. I definitely think that you can look at the Budweiser, Coors, all of these things, and you can really hate on what they've done. But at the same time, if it wasn't for the original work that they had done in the beer industry decades ago, would the United States be in the position? We have to think about the foundational aspects of it as well.
That, though, taking that big of a step back, Uncle Joe, that's too much work. It's easier just to hate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so I'm gonna be the anti voice in this argument, which is definitely, I think, the reason we wanted to talk about this. We wanted to get a couple different colors of opinions, and they definitely have done a lot of foundational work for sure, but through their business practices is the reason I would argue that. When you think of beer, in America at least, you think of Miller Lite, or the reason everyone thinks of this as beer, or the reason they have such a huge market share is because of their business practices that allowed them to corner the market. They put themselves in the position of being the most popular beer by using the government and using that sounds so such a conspiracy theorist thing to say. The government did it, but using their lobbying power and using their their control of distribution to control that market, to make themselves the top beer.
Definitely. I think something too is, so the big one that always sticks out to me when it comes to this conversation, especially recently, is Lagunitas with Heineken.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah, buying them. And it's the fact that Lagunitas is a really good beer.
Yeah.
I really like Lagunitas, and I like the fact that they were able to create a product that was so good that it could be purchased
for a lot of money.
For a lot of money. But that means
definitely.
that more people around the world can experience Lagunitas because of their distribution channels.
That's right.
So as much as I totally agree. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I'm from Berkeley. I think everybody can assume what my opinions on big business are. I like things that are good, and I like people from all over being able to try those things in an accessible way. So if larger companies buying out these smaller craft breweries, but still allowing them to keep their soul, I guess, is the big thing here, and keep the product at the same level. Because I remember when Rolling Rock was bought forever ago, because that was I grew up in New Jersey. That was one of my big first beers that I drank. Talk about sipping beers at your parents' parties.
It's in the water.
The water. And I distinctly remember that the beer started sucking after they sold.
And
there was a huge difference in the quality. And I'm talking about Rolling Rock, but it was this thing where I don't there was something about a glass bottle of Rolling Rock and 33 degrees and all of that. Then they got bought, and it just lost its quality.
Yeah. Well, so you hit on some points that we're gonna dig much more into in the next segment, about corporate buyouts in particular and what that means for consumers and the businesses. Yep. One thing that I think is really interesting. There's a lot of I feel, Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like a lot of the fear that is that surrounds big beer in general by people like us, homebrewers and craft beer drinkers, whatnot. I feel like a lot of that fear is speculation based. Yes, you've got big corporate entities who are lobbying, in government, and they're not always making the most, I guess, ethical business decisions. They do some shitty stuff. We'll be honest about that.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a way, the way that our economy in America is set up, if there's a way to avoid that without basically committing, what is ultimately business suicide. And I'm not saying that gives them a pass, right? For doing shitty stuff and squeezing the small guy. But I do, it's interesting to me that when you, again, take a nice little step back. I know a lot of professional brewers. Through Brülosophy, I've gotten to know quite a few guys who are professional brewers at craft breweries. They're not bought out by AB InBev. I can't think of one who doesn't, after a long brew day, go and grab a Coors Banquet or a Miller Lite or a Rainier or a PBR. And I know that that's anecdote, and I know that that's probably really stupid for me to point this out. But the reality is they're not worried enough not to engage in that, not to sit.
That's totally fair, man. And I think there's one degree of you are not going to touch the giant by refraining from drinking a Coors Light. Like, that is not going to change their business whatsoever.
Right.
Now, if everyone stopped, maybe, of course, the power of the individual versus the power of the many, whatever. But I don't think that's entirely speculation. Like, I've worked at breweries, and there was always, it wasn't Coors Light. It was, crap. It might have been Natty Light, actually. That was like always, it might have unfortunately been Natty Light. But that was always around because it's not super high alcohol. It's really light. It's not going to wash out your palate. It's, fairly refreshing. Even like some of the craft, quote unquote craft, American light lagers that I've had tend to be richer in character. And it can be too much at the end of the day. It totally can.
I'll tell you what, and I believe it was Jake. We were chatting about this. We have a messenger group that the Brülosophy crew sits and chats about shit on, and this had come up, and it was a pretty contentious conversation between all of us. And I believe it was Jake who mentioned something along the lines of, when I go, first off, and I want to point this out, I can go to Save Mart right now or Ralph's or whatever your local grocer is, and there's a whole craft beer section.
Yeah.
That hasn't gone away. Now, again, I'm not studying this thing on an economics level or anything like that, but it's available. People are getting shelf space. We've got local breweries, Full Circle, House of Pendragon. They've all got beer on the shelf. I've not heard complaints from them about craft going and squeezing them out, So there's that. And that's why that was sort of the basis of this is a lot of speculation comment.
Sure.
But when you go to one of those places and you're looking at that shelf, and this is the point I think Jake was trying to make, 80% of, and I love people getting out there and starting businesses and thinking that they're doing a good thing. When 80% of the craft beer that's on the shelf tastes like fucking shit, and I know that I can go and get a Rainier or get a Miller Lite and have a consistently, in my opinion, tasty beer, that matters. If we want craft to really, I don't know if it's possible, but to overcome big beer, to really rival it, it's got to be good. It's got to be a product that is better than what's out there right now. There's a lot of shitty beer out there right now.
Yes,
that's totally fair. That's a totally fair argument, especially because like smaller breweries, they don't have the resources that obviously Miller Coors does. Like, how often would you have to see a brewery scrap together and after 5 or 6 years they get a canning line?
Right.
Like, if you are Miller Coors or you're a brewery who's been bought by Miller Coors, that is not a problem on your radar. You have the resources to make the business decisions you want to make, which may result in a better product. I would counter Jake's point. And obviously he's not here, so I can do that really safely.
Yeah, shit on him, dude.
Exactly. Yes, Jake was wrong. He's an idiot. No, Jake's incredibly... Cut that out. No, Jake's great. But when I go, for this episode, I went to my local Walmart, who's like obviously... I would say a lot of parallels.
You're doubling up the evil here, buddy.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm making it worse. And on that shelf in Huntley, Illinois, I see Goose Island. I see Elysian. I see some Founders, obviously. So yeah, there's a lot of indie on the shelf, but those brands, a lot of them that I see are breweries that are nowhere close to me, and they are owned by AB InBev or Miller Coors.
Yeah.
And they're using those distribution networks.
So then here's a question. Do you think that beer should be local? In the sense that should you have to travel in the United States to try certain types of beers? Like, is there a benefit to larger distribution models?
I think 100% there is. And I also think as a business, like, I would take advantage of said distribution models if they were given to me.
Fuck yeah,
like
dude.
100%.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong in any way whatsoever, but I do have fears that, and I think this leans into a little bit the speculation that Marshall was talking about, and I'll be 100% admit to the fact that, like, while I think the patterns are there, I don't know for sure that this will happen. I fear that by increasing control of the craft market, that AmBev, and using its resources to increase said control, that InBev is going to, and Miller Coors, and like all these big businesses, are going to continue to perpetuate this idea that it is Miller versus Bud Light. Like, these are the two big players, right? And they're able to kind of just naturally force other things out because they can take long-term losses. They can easily take midterm and long-term losses and recover in 10 years, where if you're a brewery and you're under for 6 months, then you got nothing.
Well, it was like Budweiser came out with that stupid Moon beer.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
What are you talking about?
The Moon beer. No, they came out with this like beer for the anniversary of the moon landing. And it was this like whole thing, and they did all of this crazy advertising for it. It was in this like special bottle. I didn't even try it. But the thing is, they have so much money that they can just throw out like $10 million and say, oh, we're going to work on this. So, we'll see. And it sucks. It's just like,
well,
whatever,
but to that point, they have a lot of money. Okay. There's nobody who's going to argue with us on that. AB InBev, Miller Coors, Constellation, all of them. One of the things that they do with that money, arguably, and again, this is not an argument in support of big beer, but I do think that people need to realize that if it weren't for AB InBev and Miller Coors buying, for example, their buying power when it comes to hops. We did an interview with Hopsteiner last year, I believe, and I asked Dave, the guy that I interviewed on that show, I asked him straight up, what's the impact? Where would you guys be if it weren't for big beer buying your guys' hops? And he said innovation wouldn't be there. We wouldn't have nearly the acreage that we do now. Who knows what wonderful hops that Craft loves nowadays we wouldn't have because they didn't have the dollars required to innovate and to do all that goes into creating new varieties. Same thing with malt. I don't know what the impact on the yeast industry is, because yeast is kind of a different beast, as it were. But you can't. It's the cake and eat it too argument, and I feel like you don't have to be a lover of big beer, but the hate that it gets, particularly from people who have no idea what the fuck they're talking about a lot of the time, that's the part of it that kind of irks me a little bit. And again, my point here is that if it weren't for Budweiser, Miller, Coors, now Lagunitas, all of these ones, who are still, by the way, and we're going to get into corporate buyouts here in the next segment, but all of those breweries are still being run. They're the same staff, the same brewers. They're still creative. They've got resources now to do more. Yeah. There are arguments to be made for that being bad. To me, they're not as strong as the arguments for who cares. Not that it's good, but who gives a shit,
I will admit, like, as someone who I'm on the side of like big beer being bad, obviously, and I'm just going to keep reiterating that point so I get less emails than you. But I will admit, like, at the end of the day, one of the things I struggle with is like, okay, all these big brands they do employ lots of people.
That's right.
Would 100 smaller breweries employ more people potentially? I don't know what kind of work that those people would be doing in those things. I would argue big beer probably has more skilled positions that they're capable of funding as opposed to unskilled work, which unskilled work is still really important.
Absolutely.
So I get lost so quickly in the skepticism or the potential. What would the economic landscape be like if not for this? But I do have a hard time saying, like, if Miller Lite, like the actual beer, not the company, if Miller Lite was the only beer in the world, if it, like, that's the doomsday scenario, right? It is literally the only beer ever around. Aside cultural and historical impacts aside of like the role that beer and different styles have played in cultures across the world, I don't know that would change the world too much. That would be the case. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only thing out there. That might be fine. It wouldn't necessarily be bad. I think you'd see a lot more homebrewers. which is what a little people have talked about. Like the renaissance of homebrewing was because it was just Miller Coors, and Ab InBev.
But that's the beautiful thing about homebrewing. So I spent $100 yesterday at my, now albeit I was buying beer for friends, but we were at House of Pendragon here right by my house. I gave them quite a bit of money because I enjoy their craft beer. And when I got home, I cracked open a can of Miller Lite. There's this argument that it's all or nothing. If you're drinking a Miller Lite or a Budweiser or whatever, and you enjoy that, then those dollars should be going to craft. Well, I mean, you can argue that about anything in life, that you could put more money or support something else by minusing one other aspect of your life. That's not how reality works, though.
Sure. I would say, like, that is something that Jake said yesterday that did resonate with me, is like, regardless of where you fall in this argument, and if it's something that you believe in and something you are invested in, whether that is supporting these big beer brands or exclusively not supporting them, you definitely can vote both politically and with your dollar to support that argument. Like, I definitely think that there is an opportunity for people to, I don't think it needs to be one, all or nothing, but two, if it is something you care about, like a quick Google search would show you who owns who, and just don't give them your money. Yeah. If you care about it, don't give them your money, and you're totally in the right.
Well, and that's a really cool thing about being in more, like, from being in the Bay Area. It's the type of thing that if you don't want to drink these big beers, you don't have to. There are tons of small local places that you can go to, and you can find, like in the Chicagoland area, I'm sure that it's the same thing. Like, if you don't,
that was an exceptional accent, Joe.
Thank you.
that was
I was wondering if you
I feel right at home that you had said that.
But if you can go and you can do these things in a way that's like really cool. It's this whole concept of like buying local, farmers markets, all of these areas where everything is sourced within a certain radius. Like, that's really cool. I think that there are certain areas of the country where that's a lot harder. So that's
definitely
kind of what that's like the predatory business practices is what they rely on. I really like even though there are there's way more breweries and there are way more bad breweries, in my opinion. Like, that's good. I think that so long as you can find a way to make it economically viable for you, that works. And I don't really feel like big beer doesn't like that. If anything, for them, the more beer drinkers there are, the larger their market is.
That's their argument, I believe, right, Matt? Didn't AB InBev come out and say something along the lines of, we're not trying to squeeze people out, we're trying to bring more people in. Again, they're going to say what they want.
I would also say that to increase my profit in that area. Well, that's kind of the thing, though, right? Is like at the end of the day, like, as much as like we as homebrewers especially like romanticize beer and the brewing process, and I think there's probably a lot of smaller breweries that it is a very personal and romantic thing and very artistic in some ways. At the end, like, it's all about money. Like, Miller Coors does not care about the romanticism of this. There's no like, yes, we care so much about our beer drinking community. Like, maybe some people within that organization do, but it's about the dollars.
Yeah,
it's all about money.
I don't think anybody is arguing that, and I think that there's, for some reason, there's this element of our culture today, at least in this day and age, that seems that anything involving money. I mean, we could do a whole Brews Views episode on the fact that we have advertisers. Oh my fucking god, you got yes, you have to. That is the world that we live in. Yeah. That you incentivize work that you do to make it rewarding, so that you can go out and do more. I don't see that as being terribly evil. Now, I don't disagree with you as somebody who has no issue. Again, I'm not sitting here saying, woo, go big beer, come buy us out. That'd be wonderful. Miller Coors, my email address is Marshall. But
yeah, I have a price.
Yeah, we all have a fucking price. That's the point that I'm trying to make, is that you can't separate this whole sentimental thing about a beverage and being the cheerleader for only drink craft. I get it. But man, if that's what you want, then fine. But getting out there and preaching it, and again, with baseless speculation about where this could go when that's not happening. I just, there's some other stuff that I think is interesting. You mentioned earlier, Matt, about the fact that all of these conglomerates, these big beer conglomerates, employ thousands and thousands and thousands of people, providing jobs to people who need work and paychecks. And those people don't hate big beer. And you know what? I bet a good majority of them go to their local craft breweries and enjoy those beers as well. So they're, you know, again, not trying to kiss their ass, but they're not all evil. They are employing people, good jobs, good paid jobs with good unions and all of that stuff.
Halliburton employs people.
What was that?
Halliburton employs people.
Yeah,
come on.
The one thing I'll say based on that.
That's a shitty argument, Marshall.
It's a shitty argument, but it's an argument.
Yeah. It is. So what
fucking Halliburton? Come on, man.
What I'll say is that
That's right. I'm winning this.
The individuals who work for these companies, are good. I'm going.
I know.
I'm going off now. The individuals who work for these companies are good. The company itself is bad. For me, these super big, large conglomerates, the thing itself, the company, is bad. The people are good. So it's this, and this is a big thing in our society right now, where what you're seeing is this reverence of certain brands or certain markets in a really, really negative way. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the things that happen within the spectrum of their business are bad, but what is bad is for us to look at Amazon, Budweiser, whatever, and see them as this bastion of perfection. They're not. The product can taste good. It can be cool to get something in the same day. But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily good. So I think on that respect, I agree.
No. And that's the point that I want to get across to our listeners now, who probably want to burn me at the stake. But
well, they stopped listening.
They fucking skipped this one. No. And you make that is a good point. I feel like if we blindly hate, if we blindly go in just based off of what our clique says is the cool thing to do, then we miss out on really what needs to be focused on.
Absolutely.
100%.
100% agreed. Yeah, definitely.
And when we are aware of how these businesses work, I'm not saying let's go hoorah and cheer on big beer because they employ people. Of course I'm not saying that. They do some shitty stuff. But when I can look at it through a clearer lens, right? When I can focus on this thing, not just because it's cool and fun to hate them, but because I have actual concerns with their business practices, then that's what I'm saying. Then you can actually go in, and that's where regulation comes into play. That's why we have certain laws in place. And yes, big businesses, again, it sucks that this is a reality, but they're going to try to manipulate the market. They're going to try to get what's best for them, because that's just the way it fucking works right now. And it sucks. And yes, you're right. I'm not saying that if big beer were to go and try to, buy out all these craft breweries and then pretend that they're still independent and that's all you see on store shelves, yes, there's an issue with that. That was a big fear back when Goose Island was bought out by AB InBev in 2011. That's not what has happened. And I'm not sure what is going on behind the scenes. I don't think any of us can ever fully understand what that is, but it's not been as bad as a lot of people made it out or thought it was going to be.
It's like a Scrooge McDuck pool of money.
Right. Jumping in. Exactly. Well, and you know what's interesting to me also is you look at the fact that a lot, not all, but a lot of the big names in craft beer got their start with big beer. Perfect example, Stone Brewing. Fiercely independent. Like, I'm sure they've gotten multiple offers of buyouts. Yeah. They're still very independent. Their head brewer for the longest time, who's now with New Realm, Mitch Steele, got his start with Budweiser. I mean, come on. Yeah. It's not like he flipped all of a sudden. I think he probably still, and I don't mean to speak for Mitch, but my guess is he probably still views that experience with respects where he came from and appreciates the stuff that he learned there,
Yeah. Getting experience and working for somebody who knows what they're doing so that they can help you formulate your own or better. Like, one of the big things that everybody knows from work, everybody's had a crappy boss, and what you learn eventually from bosses is it's not the good things they do that teach you, it's all the bad things they do, because you learn what not to do. So I think that there's a benefit to that. In that respect too, a benefit to heavier research. I don't I really like history. I don't know how many people have looked into the specific history of Budweiser or Coors or these and done kind of extensive research on their growth and if that's something that a lot of these smaller craft breweries look into in that process.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's definitely stuff to learn from their success.
Yeah, I agree, man. And honestly, even now, this feels like such an incomplete discussion of like the role. Like, I feel like we could probably do this for like hours and hours. But if I had like a big takeaway from this conversation, it's really just that like informed decision making is worth, like, just I think the point you made, Marshall, is a good one, that like it's not good to just blindly hate on the role big beer plays. I think there's definitely legitimate arguments to them, like that their business practices are malicious, but I think that's more so a criticism of, it's an informed criticism as opposed to just like, oh, I don't like American light lager.
That's the point I'm trying to make, and I agree with you. I'm not,
and that's fair.
Yeah, I'm not sitting here saying that they're out, that they're wonderful, benevolent, corporations who just want what's best for America.
Of course,
that's not the case for a lot of the businesses outside of beer that we support with our dollars, whether that's Amazon or Walmart or whatever, 7-Eleven, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
sure. Again, when you have an informed opinion about it and you actually understand what's going on, rather than just throwing your arms up and pretending like you're cooler than everyone else because you don't drink fucking Miller Lite, there's a difference there. And I feel like there's merit to the argument that big beer does bad things. I keep saying that because I don't want people to think I'm over here, cheering them on, but it's also doesn't make me a bad person or somebody else a bad person when on a hot brew day, I'm crushing a Miller Lite to refresh myself.
Yeah,
definitely not. Yeah, definitely not. And if you shop at Walmart, you're not a criminal. Like, it's all fine.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, your shirt might fall apart after 2 washings, but besides that,
right.
Well,
you're a criminal if you steal something from Walmart.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
We have actually pretty clear definitions of what that means. So
if we end up getting
good.
a sponsorship offer from Walmart for the show, because I feel like we've talked almost as much about them as
I'll
big
take
beer.
A personal sponsorship.
Yeah. Uncle Joe would like to be sponsored.
Just a $5 gift card every month.
Yeah, well, so we spent a lot of time talking just kind of in general about big beer. We did mention a little bit about the craft beer buyouts that have happened. This has had an influence. It's impacted not just craft brewing in general, but it's had an impact as well on homebrewing. We're going to talk about that and more of our crazy opinions when we return from this short break. When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, did you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD. That's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brülosophy sent you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. I'm a huge fan of the show Shark Tank, not only because I love seeing the weird shit people come up with, and invent to solve seemingly trivial problems, but I find the business dealings pretty interesting as well. One thing that I've learned is that for many, the dream is to build a business to the point that a larger company wants to buy it from you at a huge profit. To me, maybe I'm the evil one here, but this makes sense. It seems like for many, at least who enjoy craft beer and homebrewing, there are some strong opinions against this. This was another thing, I'll be honest, that I was talking to my wife Laura about this morning, and she goes, "Give me a home brewer who doesn't aspire to be a craft brewery, start their own craft brewery at some point, who right now would say that they would turn down, an offer from AB InBev or Miller Coors, but then you put them in that situation." She goes, that you'd be foolish to not accept $1 billion or whatever it might be for a buyout. I mean, that is the American dream, right? There are people out there who would tell you right now, and I think there's an element of naivete that goes into this, would tell you that they'd turn that down. But there have been quite a few buyouts over the last decade or so.
Yeah, there's been a ton, and it's breweries, of course, that some of us would recognize, others that we maybe wouldn't. Like, obviously, I think the biggest one right now, and was kind of the impetus for this talk, was the fact that Founders just got the majority stake purchased by Maho San Miguel. That I think they had previously had a smaller percentage of ownership in Founders, and I think they also own Avery's, or own part of Avery. But yeah, Founders is officially no longer craft beer.
They are, and I believe
that fun.
Yeah, I know it is weird to read about that, because they were such a it's such a steadfast, just solid example of a successful craft brewery. And then you hear about them getting bought out. Even as somebody who doesn't care that much, there's still an element of shock. Now, my understanding is that Maho San Miguel is Spain based, but
San Miguel is a big beer in Spain.
So, and I believe that they are the conglomerate that sells San Miguel in Spain, and so they are the ones who just bought out Founders, which is the latest in a long line of corporate buyouts.
I don't know if they do it, but Moritz is a really good beer. If anybody's ever in Barcelona, drink Moritz.
That's where Uncle Joe and my sister met, was spending time in Barcelona. So, but to me, I've been doing this thing for a while, and kind of in the craft beer world for a bit. The one that really shocked me the most was back in 2011 when AB InBev acquired Goose Island. Now, this is probably you live closer to that area, Matt, than I do. Yeah. So we didn't have Goose Island over here in California. You couldn't get your hands on it, and within like 6 months of learning of the buyout, we have Goose Island everywhere now. And so it was a weird thing. And now I'll be honest, I've had multiple versions of Goose Island beers. I don't know if they've changed or not, but I'm not a huge fan of what I've tried. And that's just a preference thing. But I couldn't help but wonder. I was convinced when I first had the first time I had Goose Island IPA, I was just convinced the reason it tasted bad was because of the AB InBev buyout. I later learned that it's all the same. I believe it's all the same brewers. They didn't change the recipes or anything like that. So maybe I just don't really like their beer, but I'd imagine that was quite a while ago, 2011.
Yeah, I mean there are people that swear up and down that the beers changed post buyout. And I wasn't really familiar with the beers before they were bought out, unfortunately. So I can't say for sure whether or not I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
But there are definitely people who comment on the fact that they believe the product is now worse after that. And I think there's some people who say the same thing about Lagunitas, who's owned by Heineken. And I will say, So I think I've talked before about one of my gateway beers being Lagunitas Little Something Something.
Oh, that is such a good beer. Yeah.
Very good.
It is a great beer. I had it the other day. It's still rock solid.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. It's not like an incredible beer, and I don't think it ever really was like really incredible, but it's a good beer, and it doesn't taste different to me now post buyout.
Nope.
Maybe it just hasn't been long enough. I don't know.
No. And so in fact, I've noticed we get, Lagunitas was built in Petaluma, California. So we get really fresh examples, really, it's really good where we live. I still will, friends will bring over, a 6-pack of Lagunitas IPA or a little something. And they've got a whole bunch of other ones. I believe Lagunitas is the ones who are making Daytime or something.
Yes, Daytime.
Yeah.
And they're phenomenally good beers that I'm telling you, regardless of who owns them, they are better than 80% of craft beer you're going to pick up from some small craft brewery who happen to, be able to package their beer and get it on a shelf in the grocery store. Yeah. I think.
Sure.
So to me, in thinking about these buyouts, it seemed like 2015 was when things just really started getting crazy. We started hearing about, it seemed like every month there was a new craft brewery getting bought out. AB InBev bought out Seattle's Elysian Brewing, as well as Golden Road Brewing, which is based out of Los Angeles.
Yeah,
Now,
this surprised me.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were big beer.
So we need to talk about that. That's part of the issue that I think a lot of people are having with these buyouts is that there is an element of there's a kind of a veil that is potentially being, I don't know how else to put it. They're trying to fool you basically, and people don't like being fooled. People don't like the idea that they could potentially be fooled. And there have been some things that have come around to try to help people not get fooled. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Just a couple of some of the more surprising buyouts. In 2017, this was a huge deal. Wicked Weed was acquired by AB InBev, and that the backlash that occurred when Wicked Weed, what had they been around for like 2 years is all, and AB InBev comes in.
I mean, that was a really big one. That was a huge deal in the community at the time. I remember that all going down. It was nuts.
It was, well, and I think a part of the reason it was nuts is, we view craft beer as being a special, almost sacred thing. Mm-hmm. We view sour beer as being even more so. Mm-hmm. That is the epitome of craft. You are investing so much effort into producing this incredibly good. Imagine if the Rare Barrel, which is right down the street from you, imagine if that, you learned that Miller Coors or AB InBev came in and acquired them. There is something about that I think just on a deep, visceral level is just kind of like, what the fuck? I mean, how could you do that?
To an extent, yeah. But then there's also a part of being in Silicon Valley where people are looking to create a company and do an early exit.
Yeah.
So, like, you could look at Wicked Weed and you could say, oh, these, how could they do this to me? But you could also look at it
because it's all about me.
Yeah. But you could also look at it and say, holy shit, these guys in 2 years.
What a success, right?
Like, that's a success. Like, what are they going to do next? Like, what are these?
Yeah.
What is the brain trust from Wicked Weed going to create next? So I think there's part of that too. Yeah, there
is, and I think you raise an excellent point of and I know Marshall, you touched on this earlier, but a lot of the breweries who are bought out by a larger company the people usually end up staying, like the brewers and the people who there usually are still there, and a lot of them have come out and talked about this because, of course, they feel like they owe the community an explanation. Usually, there's usually some
we're so
kind
deserving of that.
Exactly.
Jeez.
There's usually some kind of report out from them, but they usually talk about the fact that this is going to allow them to take on projects and allow them to try things that they potentially wouldn't have had the opportunity to do without that investment or without the safety cushion of being able to potentially take a loss. There's a degree of comfort that money provides, without a doubt.
I will never forget. I believe it was Wicked Weed when AB InBev. That they backed that video that the head brewer, the owner of Wicked Weed.
God, I remember that.
Oh my God, it was painful to watch. And I'm not saying that I'm against corporate buyouts of craft breweries. I don't really know. I don't know if I have strong feelings about it either way. It's your business. Do what you want with it, and we vote with our dollars. I've still never had Wicked Weed, but from what I've heard, their beer is still absolutely fantastic. I was out in Nashville for the Brew Your Own boot camp in March, and a lot of people, I didn't have time to hit up Wicked Weed, but a lot of people were going over there and kind of felt like they had to be quiet about it because, they're big beer now. And from what I heard through the grapevine, it's still good stuff. It's not like, big beer ruined the quality of their product by any.
Well, here's what I will say is based on, you mentioned like obviously you reiterated the vote with your dollar point, right? Yeah. And I do, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, and I really do want to come back to it, is that, and Joe, you actually kind of touched on this too, the fact that you were surprised that like that company was owned by someone else is, I actually learned in research for this episode, and have you guys seen Mike Tonsmeyer, Mad Fermentationist in Sapwood Cellars? Awesome guy. He has this huge chart of like all
crazy.
of the, you know what I mean? Like it's the one that like shows the relationships between some of these big beer conglomerates and the brands that they own.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's really incredible. He does a really great synthesis of that. I did not know that Cigar City and Oscar Blues were owned by FCP.
Yep.
And I will say, like, when I saw that, I was like, oh shit. Because Oscar Blues, 1050, and Mama's Little Yella are some of my favorite beers.
And here's the deal. When that, I don't know exactly the year that happened, but I can tell you that where I live here in Fresno, California, up until about 7 years ago now, I'd heard about Oscar Blues. I've heard about Dale's Pale Ale, which I'd never tried it. And then all of a sudden, guess what we can get on the shelves now? And the quality of Dale's Pale Ale or Little Yella or it's amazing. Those are awesomely good beers. Yeah. Now, I think there is an argument to be had about when the conglomerate is, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think that people in our position, whether you're a craft beer lover or a home brewer or whatever, view all conglomerates as being as evil as big beer conglomerates, right?
Sure, of course.
So you look at things like, and I believe in the beginning, you had like Red Hook, Kona, and Widmer. They all kind of partnered up and became the Brewers Collective or the Brewers Alliance or something like that. Now, I do believe they ultimately ended up being acquired by Big Beer, some branch of Big Beer. But when you've got folks like that coming in together and just to try to they're basically in essence trying to do the same thing Big Beer is doing, or what they're saying they want to do, which is provide more resources and the ultimate goal being to bring more people into beer and sell more product. I'm not sure that people view those as being so bad. I think another example is Boston Beer Company. There's Sam Adams, obviously, but don't they also own a stake in some other? You have that chart in front of you, Matt. You can probably look.
Yeah, I do. I'm looking at it now, and it definitely Boston Beer Company also through A&E Brewing has like Traveler and Angel City,
right?
A couple investments.
Yeah. And is that evil? I don't know, because Sam Adams is still considered independent at this point.
Really?
Oh, they're huge, but they are still. In fact, I believe they keep changing the definition. The Brewers Association changes the definition to allow Sierra Nevada and Sam Adams or Boston Beer Company to maintain independent status.
So here's the thing.
Well, that's a big thing. Go ahead, Joe.
If you switch that and you make it so that they're considered big beer, what happens then?
You start hating them then, right? Because that's part of the problem. And I'll be honest, I was being cheeky, but there are people out there who will tell you Sam Adams is big beer in my eyes, and they're not, they're in it for the money. They're not in it for the little guy anymore, and they won't support him,
That's totally fair, and I think people of that opinion, especially like if they don't want to support them, like you 100% do you. Like if you feel that you need to make that decision in terms of like not supporting those companies, I think that's totally fair. As someone in this, God, I feel bad saying this, as someone who's like anti the big beer thing, I'm gonna buy 1050 and Mama's Little Yell still. It's gonna happen. I'm for sure gonna purchase those, even though they're owned by this large organization. And maybe I'll just rationalize that to myself by saying, well, it's not Miller Coors or Ab InBev. It's a smaller big one. So
it's a little less evil. Well, I think about it this way, and I think that kind of speaks to the fluidity of decision making and how we can kind of, not everything is black and white. I just bought some stuff on Amazon this morning. That doesn't mean that I think Amazon workers don't deserve a living wage or $15. I absolutely do. And just because I'm going and spending money on Amazon out of convenience doesn't mean that I'm supporting the shitty business practices that they may be engaging in.
There's a super interesting argument that can be made around the idea that we we as the consumer take the fault of the companies in a capitalist system.
Sure, yeah.
Wherein rather than these companies approaching the things that they're doing wrong, they're predatory or they're bad business practices, it goes to us and we say, oh, we should be the ones responsible by voting with our dollar, which is definitely an important thing. But at the same time, these companies should just fix these things. A lot of this comes from the conversation around kind of climate change, where people are saying, oh, I need to cut down on my carbon footprint. I need to do these things. Like, yeah, okay, that's a good thing to do. But also, all of these other big companies have to change their practices. And that by putting the responsibility on us, we're flipping it around and we're doing exactly what they want. We're making these big corporate
That's an interesting argument. Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a totally fair argument.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Well, so obviously there have been a ton of I think respectable, highly lauded, absolutely loved craft breweries that are now funded by, owned by, run by big beer. I don't think we can have a conversation about buyouts without bringing up perhaps one of the most surprising buyouts to homebrewers, and that was the acquisition of Northern Brewer by ZX Ventures, which is I believe owned by AB InBev. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but it was there. ZX Ventures came in, and we'll just say it was AB InBev came in and bought out what was the biggest homebrew shop, particularly online, I think internationally, and that caused some waves in the homebrewing world, did it not, Matt?
No, it definitely did. There was a huge criticism of that acquisition, obviously. And then a lot of people were saying that they're not going to continue doing it. But actually a good friend of ours, Chino, lives near a Northern Brewer, like a physical location. And he'll tell you that the same people still worked there. The homebrew shop was the same as it was in that regard.
I actually heard, again, I don't have evidence to back this up, but I actually heard that when AB InBev came in, that the working conditions, and by that I'm basically referring to salaries and pay, got better. People felt that they were better taken care of, and that you've no longer got.
You got money.
You've got more money, exactly, and more money that you can invest into this. I'm going to call it a product, but this business to help it grow. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think Northern Brewer was dinged too much. I think you had a lot of people who wanted to have their voice heard, in anonymous online forums.
Right.
But I think what you ultimately ended up doing, or what that ultimately the effect of that had, was it just made people who enjoy shopping at Northern Brewer just not talk about shopping at Northern Brewer anymore, but they still do it. Yeah.
Well, didn't they sell their stake? Isn't Northern Brewer no longer owned by that company?
So what? Yeah, I only learned this in researching for this episode. Apparently, ZX Ventures sold Northern Brewer to a what's called Blackstreet Capital Holdings. This happened back in July of 2019, and the idea there, what Blackstreet they released a statement basically saying we're bringing Northern Brewer back to its independent roots, which I don't know what to think about that.
By buying their independence?
I don't.
Is how you do that?
I don't get it. Do you remember, Matt, when the announcement came out that NB had sold to AB InBev, Chris Farley, who started Northern Brewer from the ground up, and kudos to him.
Definitely.
He released a statement, and to me, I feel like he had to do it. He had to let the people know, what his thinking was in all of this. And in this statement, I'm going to paraphrase. He basically said, AB InBev has the best interests of homebrewers at heart. They want Northern Brewer to continue to grow and to provide the best prices. And that was a big fear that we can talk about, is that AB InBev was going to come in, undercut everybody else to basically monopolize the home brewing market, right? So
absolutely.
So if I can get grain at 50 cents per pound cheaper or whatever from Northern Brewer, then why wouldn't I do that? And there was a big fear that, and that's the argument about craft beer buyouts as well, is that, you can't sustain, as a smaller homebrew shop in this case, you can't sustain if they're undercutting you by enough to where you can't make a profit. The margins are too small.
So I just went with my family to Disneyland.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's where I had the Golden Road. They have this really good mango streetcar beer that I really like. Anyway.
I'm sorry.
Gross.
So we're there, and I'm hanging out in Disneyland and just looking around and seeing all these things. There's Star Wars Land. They have Marvel Comics stuff and all the Mickey and Minnie and the princesses and all that. And you realize that probably like 70% of the entertainment that I and like my family enjoy is from Disney, one big company,
A conglomerate
that's kind of managing and controlling all of these things. Now, there are a ton of, there's a whole other thing, but what I'm trying to get at with this is what Disney has been able to do through its large conglomerate is give really great artists the opportunity to create really great films and really great TV shows and comic books and all of that. So there's a benefit there. At the same time, Disney has a pretty bad history.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I think, what we're looking at in our society is that if you're in a capitalist society, there are going to be aspects of it that you can't avoid, that you can't get away from.
Yeah.
You can do everything you can to do it, but at the end of the day, if you're going to be a part of this society, it's going to be very difficult to completely avoid it.
You won't be able to navigate. You'll drive yourself crazy, basically. One of the
that's
things,
the hard part.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that you mentioned that I feel like maybe we can spend the rest of the time of this episode on is this idea that you didn't know Golden Road wasn't independent, and that is a big issue. There's this idea that transparency is very important, and consumers being well informed so that they can make the best decisions. And there have been some things, I mentioned it earlier, that have been created to help consumers be more informed in their purchasing decisions. And I think of late the biggest one is a label that the Brewers Association created that independent people who qualify as independent breweries, so not AB InBev, can put this label. They can smack a label on their bottles or their packaging, and that is a way for a consumer to go to the store and say, "Oh, I'm not supporting big beer by buying this." So, for example, Goose Island cannot use that label, but Golden Road cannot use that label, but Sierra Nevada can swap that, throw that label on their beer, and now you're an informed consumer.
Or like Dust Bowl up in
Dust Bowl will throw that on there. Yeah, exactly.
So
anything local or independent.
So who runs that?
That's the Brewers Association, and they've done a lot of good for not just homebrewing, but for craft beer and really getting it out there. I have some pretty strong opinions about the label thing, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of ambivalent towards the label itself. I wouldn't go out and be like, oh yes, this is an independently marked beer and I'm going to buy it. But that's just because I don't care about that in terms of my purchasing power. But that said, I do, and I can't prove this, I do think that it is intentional that places like Oscar Blues and Goose Island, and all those brands do not have a brand of Miller Coors on their bottle. I do think it's intentional that branding is not disclosed. You can obviously go find it out. It's a public information. It's how Tom's Meyer put his list together. It's how you can Google it if you want, and find out hey, who owns this thing? You can definitely try to look into it. But I do like that the label provides a degree of helping you navigate that space, because if you are the kind of person who wants to vote with their dollar and who wants to only be supporting independent things, then have you ever tried to avoid Nestle in a store? You have to have an app and scan barcodes and be like, no, this thing is also owned by Nestle. Yeah. So it's insane to try to navigate that without some kind of indicator that, hey, this thing is either legit or, hey, this thing has a relationship to big beer.
Well, so I kind of like your ambivalent position on it, that you don't. And I'm with you. Whether that label is on the bottle or not is going to have zero influence on me.
Right.
I think from a just thinking about it, and when I'm looking at the intention, the biggest response I have is a major eye roll. I think that first off, it presumes ignorance on the consumer's part, and they wouldn't do it if they didn't think that you didn't know that, or you didn't need some indicator. If I'm the type of person who cares that much, I don't need a label. I'll go research it myself. Otherwise, I just don't think people again, this is my opinion. I don't think people are paying that much attention to it, which, and they have to know that, right? The people who are promoting the use of this label have to understand that piece of it. And if that's the case, then I can't help but wonder what the other motives are for doing it. It's almost like in group, out group again. Like, oh, if you have this, you're a part of our club. And I don't think they would argue against that. But that whole mentality is something that I just find really distasteful.
You don't like the tribalism.
That really is, and that's the case for me in so many realms of life. We don't have the tribalism. That's such a perfect way to put it. Is that they're really trying to keep it separated, keep it apart. We are so different from them, and I think when you do that, you neglect potential inroads and things that could be, I don't know, working together.
Matt, that's such a great word to use that describes so much of this, because I think a lot of just the general nature of these beers and these buyouts is a sense of tribalism towards something that's local, something that only you used to be able to get. That was like yours, and then it becomes something that's not just yours anymore.
Yeah. Well, how many times when you were in junior high did you have a local band that you loved, and then they signed a big record, and before you even heard the new record that they signed to a big record label, you already hated them, right? Because they're big now. What it is that you lost this special little thing that you thought was yours, and you had this idea in your, and I feel like there's elements of that with big beer and the creep that they're having in craft brewing and home brewing and whatnot. And I just wonder to what extent, if we were to loosen up the fear, if we were to, not be so worried about it, if things would really be as bad as I think a lot of us are assuming.
What's the Real Big Fish?
The scop. Oh, I was never into Real Big Fish.
No, sell out with me. Okay.
So if you wait till the end of this, we'll have Uncle Joe doing karaoke at the end. But we've spent a lot of time talking about our thoughts and our opinions. I honestly thought we were going to be at each other's jugulars a little bit more than we were. I feel like we kept this a fairly clean. I know that some of what we said probably irked some of our listeners, and that's okay. That's a beautiful thing about being human, is we can disagree and then all come together and hug each other out. Hey, Matt, do you have any final thoughts on big beer and their influence on craft and homebrewing?
No, I remain in my position of I don't love it.
You can email Matt at brülosophy.com.
You have not impacted me at all. I still don't believe that it's a good thing. But that said, I definitely think that it's just so complicated, and I still don't, I did a ton of research for this, and I still don't feel like I'm informed at all about the backroom dealings and what's actually going on and all of that. So I have to trust, hopefully they do good things. Hopefully the Brewers Association continues to be a force for good, and hopefully maybe there is a middle of the road that hopefully people who are good within the organizations and Miller Coors can do things to support craft brewing and do that. I don't know. It's just so difficult, but vote with your dollar, have an informed opinion. Bud Light tastes fine.
Yeah.
Is that good? Is that good closing thoughts?
But you know what? Bud Light is my least favorite of the three popular light beers. So you can hate on that all you want. Uncle Joe, you have any final words, man?
Yeah, I used to go to sporting events, and you would just have to pay $10 to drink Bud Light.
Yeah.
And I like that now I can go to a sporting event and pay $10 and drink a Lagunitas or drink some other type of thing. So the general beer experience is better. I definitely think that it's important in whatever you do to be a knowledgeable consumer.
Yeah,
to do
be
your
conscious
research,
of it.
to know what's going on. And if it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, I think that's the key that for me is be knowledgeable when you are purchasing. Also, though, be informed when you're choosing not to like something. When you're choosing, and if you so choose to be on the side of absolutely detesting big beer, that is perfectly okay. Understand why. Understand why you detest it, so that you can have an intelligent conversation and not just be a goofball sitting around with a bunch of homebrewers drinking shitty craft beer because you're afraid to have some. You know what I mean? And that's my thing. I'd like to leave all of our listeners with the wise words of one of my favorite philosophers. His name is Fritz Perls. He says, "I do my thing and you do your thing. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you are not in this world to live up to mine." All right, don't forget to head over to brülosophy.com to read about all of the experimental stuff we're up to. The Brülosophy Podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy Podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no